The other day, I was looking through some of my old stuff, and I came across these four things. Now, to most people, these look like just regular pre-made Pokemon decks, but actually, there's something different, because each one of these has their own little funky name on them. And this is actually my first attempt at making my own card game. I did this a couple of years ago. I kind of got crazy into it. I was really working hard on it, until eventually it just kind of fell out. I think I was moving at the time, and I kind of just put these away, and I finally found them in an old moving box. Now that I've found them, I kind of want to pick up where I last left off, but all of my notes associated with each of these things are missing and are gone. I have no clue where they are, so I have to pick it up from scratch now. But all that I have here are four pre-made decks, each full of energies, which I guess hints at how crazy I was at collecting Pokemon cards at the time. But ultimately, each of these is filled with nothing but energies and Sharpie on them, pretty much making my own cards. Now, it's breadcrumbs definitely, but I definitely can. Some of these I got a little specific with, where I wrote like little descriptions. But other than that, I have no clue of what I was doing. All I remember are kind of faint memories of creating these, faint memories of different things that I plan on having it do. But in a nutshell, I wanted to create some sort of war type card game that created a battlefield where you moved cards across this kind of general area between two different rivaling leaders, kings and queens, princes, and stuff like that. And so I know that there was some sort of concept of movement as well as combat and strategy, and so I want to pick up the pieces and go from there. Ultimately, I just pulled it back out again. Like I said, I have these couple of pre-made decks and everything, and I guess we can kind of dig into this, and hopefully I can get more information, strike my memory a little more on what each of these do. And so, I mean, follow me for this whole journey of me creating my own card game based off of cards that I put together, 2 years ago now. So let's see. Let's first break into Prince Kilderaz's fleet. Now, with Prince Kilderaz's fleet, before I go into the details of this deck specifically, I guess I should kind of go through different types of cards. So let me get this all situated first. Now, in the game, it seems that I had four kind of main categories of cards. We have command cards, spell cards, nature cards, and then troop cards. If we kind of break into these troops first, it gets kind of simple here. We have things like air troops like a Nightmare Raven. Looks like we have two of those. We have water troops like battleships and properly trained battle lobsters. And then we also have just regular kind of high fantasy troops like bands of troops, mercenary archers. We have a lowlands bull right here, which all kind of seem good as they are. Next we have command decks. These seem to kind of influence how the game is played. From what I remember, I wanted these commanders, these leaders and everything, to kind of influence how you had to play your game. Each one would have kind of pros and cons to each, would allow or disallow certain cards to be played during the time, as well as these command influence cards that would ultimately either bolster your own army or kind of hinder the opponent. And then of course we have kind of supplies, which would kind of act as some sort of cost for the troops that you have, or something like that. It looks like I have some extra rations or building supplies, food offerings. It seems kind of each one is roped into a cost for the troops. Next we go into our nature cards. We have, this kind of goes into how I wanted the game to be formatted, because you see here we have nature, terrain. I think I was kind of bouncing between the name terrain or terraforming, but ultimately I kind of wanted each to be the board to be set up in multiple columns, and each column being addressed a certain terrain, which required a certain movement to go over. Like this Great Plains requires one movement, which you can see. For example, this band of troop has one movement. It can go into a Great Plains just fine, but these water of deep depths or vast oceans require something like a battleship with a movement of 3, or something that can at least traverse that. And so we have those nature cards, as well as weather cards, which would then add a little spin onto the terrain, like flash flooding. Adding this card to an area makes the area water, which would then kind of go into that 3 movement piece. Or ground tremors, discard 2 land troops on the area this card is placed. Adding a spin into these different columns that you had. And finally we had spells. Here I have dark spells and natural spells, which I'm guessing would kind of feed into what type of spells your commander would allow you to place. Now ultimately we have kind of things like Foresight, which I'm guessing is you just draw extra cards. Clear Skies, I could imagine that negates certain weathers. Flaming Hail, just kind of simple damage ones, or Recycled Magic Book. Some of these cards I really wish I would have written down. There's especially one of these Influences one, I believe there's. We have stuff like Riots. Manufactured Bad News is one that I wish I would have written down, because that sounds really cool, but I have no clue what I wanted to do. And then of course you have dark spells like Alchemy, Determined Warriors, Blood Sacrifice, stuff like that. And so ultimately the deck is kind of split into these type of different classes and these different categories of cards here. And it looks like for the most part this Prince Kilderaz's Fleet pre-made deck that I made relies heavily in the command field, where there's lots of influence like Bountiful Harvest, Riots. I already went through a couple of these. Hired Ferry. And so while there's not a lot of boats in here for it being a fleet, a decent amount of ground troops, not a lot of weather or nature manipulation, and of course kind of heavy on the natural spells rather than the dark spells. I mean, granted I don't know the current meta of this game, but I'd like to think that this is a pretty solid takeaway. Let's move on to the next one, just so we can kind of do a full audit. Now the next one here, Mistress Tayami's Intuition. Now that already sounds kind of like it's I'm trying to think of the word. Like a magi, or some sort of like, I'm thinking of the word. I've literally been watching Agatha all along right now. But some sort of magical based person, and I can confirm that there's definitely a lot more spells, both dark and natural, within this deck than the other one did. We have repeats like Recycled Magic Book, Flaming Hail, Heavenly Offerings, which looks like a new one, Clear Skies, Mystical Arrow Barrage, looks cool, and Mustering Winds. That seems pretty awesome, as well as Determined Warriors, Blood Sacrifice, Haruspicy? Is that how I pronounce that? Cursed Memories, Alchemy, and Void Voices. That kind of seems like it's pretty cool. Now, I forgot to mention this in the last one, but I wanted the rulers to be able to evolve throughout the time. So starting here, we have Mistress Tayami, the Empath, which is kind of just a basis of where you'd start. But throughout the game, you'd be able to evolve into maybe Mistress Tayami, the Medium. And that's the one I was looking for, a Medium. And then eventually kind of shifting into Mistress Tayami, the Clairvoyant, each kind of ramping up the abilities of the leader, as well as it looks like I have an extra leader in there, Lady Shikamo, whatever that means. But influence, we have some Democratic Resolve, which looks interesting, Bountiful Harvest, and then some food offerings, a lot of actually only food offerings, which I'm guessing kind of go into the cost of these troops. Now, there's no water troops in here, but these air troops we have are the Chaotic Spirit of the Storm, lots of Sacred Birds, and a Scythic Dragon, which I think is cool, and Chaotic Spirit, as well as Wyverian Spirits, Band of Troops, and stuff like that. Now, we do have access to two water terrains, a lot of weather here with Forest Fire, Flash Flood, and Heavy Winds, and then of course a whole bunch of just regular kind of land areas like Forgotten Graveyard, Great Plains, and stuff like that. So overall, I think this is really cool. I like how it kind of digs deeper into the magic, which I wish I would have written down more of the magic spells. That way I knew what they were doing, but nonetheless, let's move on to the next one. Now here we have Commander Rashnuk's Fortress, or Rashnuk's Fortress. Seems to be kind of definitely heavy in the troop area. No dark spells at all, only natural spells, as well as a decent amount of commanding supplies. We go from Rashnuk the Defensive into Rashnuk the Sturdy, and then Rashnuk the Fortified, which I think is pretty cool. We have just a couple of water things, two battleships, Mercenary Archers, Wyverian Spirits, which we saw in the last one, Band of Troops, Lowlands Bowl, Xanterra's Order, which I think is probably my attempt at some lore building in here, as well as some catapults, which I think is cool. That attack is a 4, defense a 2, which I think is one of the highest cards in here. When it comes to weather and mountains, or at least land areas, we got one vast ocean, Mountains of the Keeper, Great Plains, as well as some tailwinds, forest fires, ground tremors, etc. Nothing new when it comes to spells, I don't think. Foresight, Recycled Magic Book, Xanterra's Blessing, which I guess is also referring to some lore that I had made. And then building supplies, extra food rations. And then with influence, we have bountiful harvest. Efficient strategy, also another card I wish I would have written something for. Organized assassination, which I believe is just has to do with how I wanted the leadership situation to be. I think it's like an organized assassination you can use to remove the other person's commander or leader, I guess. And actually, I remember I was thinking that it would be cool if you can put, like, some leaders, of course, will have like pros and cons. Some leaders will have more cons than others that you can actually kind of force into your opponent's castle or kind of leadership, where they have to play by rules that you define. I feel like that could easily get like manipulated too far, or it would just be a whole other battle in itself. And so I feel like the terms, in order to actually put one of your cards into their leadership spot, have to be very, very high, or the cost would have to be very, very high in order to do that, just to discourage people from just like constantly doing it. But efficient strategy, we got hired fairy, stuff like that. Easy peasy. Rashnux seems kind of heavy on the troops, not really on the spells, stuff like that. So let's go into the last one, Queen Shelny. Now, finally, we have a Queen Shelny. Starting off with Queen Shelny the Tactician into Queen Shelny the Desperate, which I think is interesting, or Disparate. I don't know if that's a difference. And then Queen Shelny the Triumphant with King Terrence the Popular, which I think is cool. We have some command cards like Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weepers. Another one that I wish I would have written something down, because that sounds cool, but Organized Assassination, actually remove a ruler and replace it with your own. So yeah, I was correct with that last one I was looking at. And then Riots, place this card inside a castle, which that kind of goes into how I wanted the battlefield to be set up, which I'll go into in just a moment, as well as efficient strategy. And we have some command cards, food offerings, building supplies, extra rations, as well with some battleships, properly trained battle lobster once again, sacred birds, band of troops. I don't know. I think the only one that kind of differs here is there is a rotten bishop. It's a dark troop, which I think is the first one that I've seen a dark troop for. We have Great Plains, Forgotten Graveyard, which I like to think maybe goes into the Rotten Bishop, with it being a dark troop. Maybe it has to be in some sort of graveyard. And then a Water of Deep Depths on the terrain piece. Regular weather like Tailwind, Ground Tremor, Lightning Storm, Flash Flood. Adding this card to an area turns into Water Zone, yeah. Blood Sacrifice, which I'm wondering now that I'm thinking about it, Blood Sacrifice might be the equivalent of like the food offerings or building supplies. It might just be the dark equivalent of the cost, which I think might be cool. Determined Warriors. I'm thinking Determined Warriors was some sort of like necromancy, bringing them from the dead, back from the discard pile. And then Flaming Hail, Clear Skies, Foresight. Nothing new here with the recycled magic. So ultimately, now that I've gone through all four of them, it's starting to kind of flow a little bit. So while I'm kind of in this inspired flow state, I might see if I can kind of write down as many rules as I remember. But as it sits now, that's where I am in this process. I've found about 4 different pre-made decks that I made 2 years ago. I got a whole lot of questions to ask, a whole bunch of stuff to kind of recreate. But I am excited. I really am. I'm excited to see if I can kind of recreate this and what happens with it. So join me on this little journey of me creating this card game out of a whole bunch of old Pokemon cards and a dream. But until then, I'll see you next time.